Okay, Chapter 9, Develop Plan View Geometry. In this case, we are going to develop our proposed alignment. And so let's, if you're not in it already, go ahead and get into your alignment design.dgn, that 2D file. If you kind of want to see what's going on so this all makes sense here, you might want to go to your reference dialog, turn on your image just for a second so as we think about this. And like I said earlier, we're not going to be able to just extend that tangent because then we'd have to take this barn, and we're going to try to avoid that. So what we did on this project was we just kind of got past the barn and then we pulled a tangent off that curve. And in fact, this is what the final product's going to look like here. I did this earlier, and so anyway, let me turn that off. But where we're going to get all this information is if you go back to your student folder under CAD Documents, there should be a folder in there called Final PSE. In there you'll see the actual plans. And I think we probably want to go to the ATB sheets, sheet number 11. And let's go ahead and just design this alignment exactly, well, how the real thing was actually done. We're gonna go ahead and use the same radius. We'll pull that tangent at the exact same station. So go ahead and write down that station, 387 plus 47.75. We'll just all do the same thing here. And then the first thing I'm going to do here is I need to identify that station. Now in the past, I'm sure you've used something called AccuDraw, but what was not available for Geopack anyway was something called Civil AccuDraw, and that's what's required here. It kind of not replaces, it's just, this is just different, but you know, in Geopack you would have used curvilinear coordinates to identify an exact station offset. Well, here we're going to use Civil AccuDraw. And so under the Geometry tab, you should see the Civil toggles here. Go ahead and just click on that. That should pop up this dialog here. We're going to use that very last one. If you right click on it, you'll see it says Station Offset. Again, we want Civil AccuDraw to be turned. Make sure that first button is highlighted, toggle Civil AccuDraw. So now let's look at a difference here. If we were to just draw a line anywhere, what do you notice different here? You notice on the cursor there's the station offset, and the reason why it's providing that information is because, well, we have station offset toggled up there. So, but what is that referring to? That because the Civil AccuDraw could be pointing to any line. Actually, in ORD, every line technically has a station. They all start at 0 unless you change it. So we need to the first thing we need to do is tell what alignment we're going to be working with. And so in order to do that, on the keyboard, press O one time. You get this little message select reference element. And so I'm going to just drop down, I'm going to select it. Now, as I move my cursor around, notice the station offset is tracking now my existing alignment. And hopefully you wrote down that station, but we're going to, let's just go up into place a simple line command. We'll go back and now let's type in that 387 plus 47.75. I click enter, it locks it in. I'm going to click 0, lock that in. So now notice that dashed blue line, you can see a pointer there barely, but basically when I hit my left mouse button, see it's forcing that line to be drawn to that station that we're looking for, right? So that's going to kind of help us pull a tangent, you know, at that location. There's other ways I could have done this and probably less, using less tools maybe, but this is just one of you know, it's one of 10 different ways we could do this. Let's just, and to me this is kind of simple to do it this way. So we're going to pull that tangent. Now, just like in CAD, always right, you always had to have things on the right level, weight, and color. And like we've talked on previous chapters here, we pretty much have to have a feature definition set for most everything. And so let's bring up that feature definition. So under Standards, Feature Definition Toolbar. And we're going to be, what are we doing? We're adding the proposed alignment, right? So there will be a feature definition for proposed alignment. And so I want to make sure that first button is toggled, which, you know, that's just kind of activating it. So when I do any work here now, it's going to use whatever feature definition that I set. So I'm going to go to Alignment, Propose Center Line. And so now, as you can see, that line is going to be what you're used to seeing for proposed center line, right? Okay, so now we want to pull a tangent. Now the distance doesn't really matter a whole bunch. We're going to use a fillet command, but let's pull that tangent. So this time let's go up and place a line, but instead of placing just a simple line between points, let's instead go line from element. And we'll just, okay, so we're going to pull a simple line from an element. So you can see in the little picture there, they're pulling a line off of a curve, right? So let's go up here, and as far as in your dialog, set trim to none. We don't want to modify that existing alignment at all. We're just going to leave that set to none. One thing with feature definitions, I should have also mentioned that every feature, in addition to having a feature definition, it also has a name. So virtually like every line, curve, every element in your design file, every feature, you could call it, is going to have a name. Everything has a name. So I'm just going to go with the default name on this. And so I'm going to follow my prompts. Okay, locate the element. And when you've got that circle on your cursor, that's just saying to just identify the element. We're not necessarily saying we're going to pull it from there. We just, you know, what curve is it that you want to pull this tangent from? So I left click on it one time. And then I'm going to go back to where that line intersects with the alignment, because I know that's the, you know, the right station. And I'm going to snap to it. Data point to accept. And then you can see that I'm pulling a line tangent from that exact station. And so, like I said, the length is going to be adjusted later. So I'm just going to randomly go out here somewhere. And data point to accept. And trim, none. And that's it. We're not going to need this other line here anymore. I'll go ahead and just delete that line. And then what else did we say we want to do? Well, we want to tie in here, right? So just to make that simple, I'm just going to go back to that simple line between points, right? And I think I'll just snap to each side of this line. And I could go with that as is if I like. I think I'll turn off Civil AccuDraw. So I think in my reference dialog, why don't we go ahead and just turn off the existing oh, that's actually in this file now I think about it. Let's turn the level off in that case. See, I'm just going to turn off my existing levels. And I think I'll turn that Bing off. I just want to kind of keep this clean so it's a little easier to work. Okay. So there we go. We got our two tangents. Now how do we say we're going to introduce that curve? ORD has something that you're probably it's similar to what you're used to in using microstation tools, you know, place a fillet, right? So we're going to go up here to our arcs, and we want to place an arc between elements. And in this case, it's just going to be a simple arc, just one radius. It's not 2 or 3 center curve. Actually, it's going to be this bottom one, arc between elements. And I guess we'll show you later something. I could show you something that is built into. Maybe we'll do this more in like the advanced class, maybe the second class. See how the radius it was toggled already. There's a number in there. Well, one thing that's pretty slick, if I set I'm not going to do it here. I'm not going to, trying to stay on track. Set my design standards toolbar. I could actually do that, and if that was set and I had set the 50 mile per hour design speed and all that, when I go to create a fillet, it would actually set that radius to the 50 mile per hour radius, which you could choose to use or not to use, or go with something flatter, which is what I did in this case, because I ended up with a real if you go with the radius that's in the table, you end up with a real short arc, which was really too short. So I ended up going with a 1650 on the arc. So if you were to look at the old plans, if you were to call up your PDF again, you'd see that we used a radius of 1650 there in the curve data. So now you could make some of these decisions before you even get started by using, you got two ways of doing this, because it brings up the dialogue and it brings up like these heads up prompts, I guess you call them. I don't know, I use a little bit of both. It says trim, extend. Well, I know I'm going to want to trim both of these in this case, so I've got that set to both. I can set my radius here if I want. I can set my back and head offsets to 0. Tapers, I want that set to none. No transitions in this case. You know, all this should be none. This is just we just want to do a simple fillet. No tapers, no transitions, no nothing. Of course, we want to still make sure that feature definition is still set to geom, PR, underbar, center line. So now I just read my prompts. I select my back tangent. Because I had previously set the offset, notice that it's already keyed in for me. I still have to data point to accept a back offset of 0. On the ahead, it automatically chose it for me already, but I do want to tell it I want the offset to be 0. And then notice if I bring my cursor above or below, it's going to say, what side do you want this arc on? I want it on that side. Data point, and then data point to accept that I want to trim both. There we go. And we see that it extended that line for us and provided the arc. Looks like I've got don't I get a line on top of its own? No, maybe it just seemed that way. Okay, so that's exactly what I want. At this point, if I'm happy with it, if I want to change it, remember if I'm using these new ORD smart lines, I don't know if they have a special name for these or not, but they're ORD lines, let's call them. But again, they act differently. I can still select them if I want to. I could modify it at this point, but I'm not going to modify anything. I could still select that arc. I'm going to change the arc right here if I wanted to. Or, again, you're going to see in ORD, like with everything else, I could do an element info. It's going to tell me everything it knows about this arc, and I can still change it after the fact. You know, I don't, very much so, ORD is based on data. You know, it's like, it's more so than drafting. it remembers all the data. And then amazingly enough, you can select something. You go back to these element info. You can change any property, and it redrafts it for you. It redoes it based on data, based on attributes. That's it's a lot like GIS that way, I guess. In any case, though, I'm happy with what I have here. So the next thing I want to do is chain together these elements. So I'm going to go up to, I want to make sure I'm under horizontal, not vertical. Horizontal tools, complex geometry. I'm going to choose the first one, complex by element. I got it set to automatic. I want the stationing to be left to right. So I hover over that line on the left. I see that arrow, so I can see which way the stationing would go. That's the way I want it, left to right. So I'm going to data point to accept, and data point to accept again. And so now notice if I go to select it, so now it's all chained together, right? So now I could go with the stationing that it's set when I created that. Or if I want to change it, in fact, I don't even remember if I set this. I don't think I did. So now, see, I select it, it says 0. So the stationing right now is 0. For the actual job, I think I started the stationing at 100. So let's just do that and give us a little practice for stationing alignments anyway. So if I want to change that station after the fact, one way I can do it is to go up to this Modify button. Click Start Station. I want the start distance set to 0 because I'm just going to go right from the very end. I'm going to type in 100 plus 0, 0, and then I can just click on that alignment. It's going to go to the very beginning. I'm going to data point to accept that distance. Data point to accept that station now, or type it in here. I guess if you haven't done so, you can do it either location, but you still have to accept it, and it's done. So now when I click on this, see how it says station 100 there? In fact, I could even change it here. If I could make that 101. So now the whole alignment's restationed. Well, I guess I changed it to 1 plus 01. I'll change it back to 100 plus 00, since that's what I want. And the last thing I'm going to do, and you should already know how to do this, we did this with the existing alignment, and that is we're going to annotate that proposed. And we're going to do that by going up to Drawing Production, Element, Annotation, click on the chain anywhere, reset to complete, and there's the annotation. My drawing scale is set to 20. This is actually going to be a 50 scale job. I'll go ahead and change just in general working 50 here, even though it's not going to matter on the sheets. This is really design file specific when you change an annotation. So it's saying in this design file it's being visualized as a 50 scale. And that looks good. There's my proposed alignment. Maybe I'll go ahead and before I get out of this, maybe I'll turn back. I could just go levels, turn back on my existing if I want. And yeah, looks good. Let's go ahead and do a save settings, and that ends chapter 9, I believe it was. Let's make sure of that. Yeah, chapter 9.